Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, welcome back to the podcast. We are coming to you up above Dave Grohl Alley in beautiful downtown Warren, Ohio from Two Ticks and the Dog Productions. I am your host, Jim Fogarty. I'm really excited to have this guest on to talk about our health, to talk about epigenetics, to talk about how you can crack the code and unlock your genetic potential. But before we get to that, I've got to mention our incredible, generous, and wonderful sponsors. I'll name them off for you, and you can always go to our website at theprodcast.net, scroll down to the bottom where our sponsors are located, and click on any one of their icons and be directed to their website so you can find out more information about them. They are Ottavio Musumeci's Station Square Restaurant, located in Liberty, Ohio. I almost flubbed that. I wanted to say Belmont and couldn't get it out at the same time. They're on Belmont Avenue in Liberty, Ohio. Salvatore's Italian Grill. He's got multiple locations. I love the Howland one. It's my favorite one. Kind of the home court, if you will. Modern Methods Brewery, located right down Dave Grohl Alley. Open several days a week. And they also have a new tap room on West Market Street, which is right down below us as well, but on the opposite side of the building. So you can go to Dave Grohl Alley and go to the brew pub, if you will, or the brewery, the tasting room there, or you can go to the what's called the Darlene Lounge, which is on West Market, which is pretty cool. Also, Green Life Holdings. My man Zach Byler will talk to you about your financial future and security and set you up if you need to talk about retirement and those adult things that we need to talk about, because you're not always going to work forever. You're going to want to have that little nest egg built up. He can help you do that. And also, last but certainly not least, Brokers Realty. One of the number one places to go in the Valley if you are selling your home or you are buying a home. See my man Dan Alvarez over at Brokers Realty. Great guy. Without further ado, he is Dr. Andre Camelli. He is the author of Cracking the Code, Unlock Your Genetic Potential, a book I just finished reading. It's phenomenal, and I want to talk about it. And he is here to educate our listeners and myself today on some of these health practices. Dr. Camelli, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. I know taking time out of your busy day, healing people is challenging. But hopefully, like we were talking before the show, we can maybe put that idea of healing into one of the listeners' minds. And if it helps one person, if some of these ideas helps one person, that's a win.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
We met years ago. I got to shout out our mutual friend and boy, Danny Watchie.
Yeah.
Danny Watchie was a neighbor of mine and a schoolmate of mine, 7th and 8th grade at St. Mary's Middle School. And he was, we were kindred spirits. We were both into martial arts. He was big into martial arts, Eastern martial arts, and I was big into boxing. But we both loved Bruce Lee. And then one day he introduces me to his buddy, Andre Camelli, who's another martial arts guy. And we hit it off, of course. And I got to ask you, have you had it? I haven't seen Dan Watchie in a gazillion years. And I had a number for a while from Riyad Hamad.
Right.
And that number, once I got around to using it, it didn't work. But
yeah. No, I went and visited him. I was in school. I did like my pre-med in the early, 93, 4, 5. And then I did my doctorate stuff in the late 90s, and we actually went up to do an internship in Washington State. I drove through Denver because I had a working number for him at that time.
Oh, yeah?
And he had moved, and he was like a sous chef up at this restaurant in it was Denver or Fort Collins. I think it was Denver. But we stopped in, man. He fed us, and we caught up, and it was just delicious stuff. But I guess he moved out west where his parents were at Newport Beach, California.
Oh, is that right?
But then, I kind of lost contact.
Yeah.
That old number didn't work anymore, and then that was that.
I know. I often I'll search his name on Facebook sometimes, and never get a hit or whatever. Sometimes I'll put his name into Google, but he was he is an awesome guy.
Oh yeah.
His parents used to have Yamatos.
Yeah.
At the old Yamatos, it was like up the top of the hill on the strip.
Yep.
I was just talking about that with somebody the other day. Who was that? And they were going, "Oh, you're old enough to remember. What was that first?" It was like the first sushi place in town. And I was like, "Man, which one are you talking about?" And I thought that the person was talking about that place was where the old, I forget what built, was Jimmy Chef was in there? there was another place. It wasn't Yamato's.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you talking about that? And he's like, no, it's like the original. We're like, oh, Yamato's, man.
Yeah.
One of the best things was going over to Watchy's house, being a teenager, and they always had like all kind of food from Yamato's in the fridge. Oh, man, we used to eat like kings.
Oh man, we used to train all the time. We were karate guys.
Yeah.
Him and I, and man, after training, he would take us into the kitchen there at Yamato's, and he would just fire like all these grills up, and like we would be eating. Then his dad would bring it over these trays of like sushi that he just prepared for us, and I had never had sushi before, and he was just like, well, educated me on what the heck it tastes, and all these other textures and tastes. I was just like, whoa, this is so awesome, because I love eating, half Greek and half Italian. So it's like, right. And this dude, at that time he was into like powerlifting too. He ate like 6-8 times a day. So it was all the time. Him and I were just like, yeah, are you hungry? Yeah, let's go. And he would just fire up the grill, man. We would eat.
I think he weighed, I want to say at one point him and I were like the same size, except I was maybe an inch or two taller, and he was just thick. I mean, thick and shredded.
Yeah.
And I remember one time we were wrestling in my basement, and I kind of pinned him on the couch. Like I must have tackled him on the couch or something, and I pinned him, and he had his arm trapped underneath of him, and I was like horsing around, and he was like, all right, get off me. And I thought he was just playing. And so I was like, I'm not getting off. I was like pressing it a little bit.
Right.
And he was like, no, I'm serious. Get off me. And I still thought he was pressing it. And he one arm pressed me and him both up off the couch. He was a powerful dude. I think at the time he weighed, I want to say like 150 pounds and was benching like 310.
Yeah. He was a strong guy.
He was a strong dude. A great dude. Great. We had a lot of great times. And, he was into the same, I always kind of feel like the stuff that you're talking about in this book and the way that my ideology of medicine is similar to the same philosophies that he had about martial arts and taking care of himself and, kind of this holistic approach.
Absolutely.
And I'm kind of curious. I know you wrote about it in the book, but I don't want to tell your own story and recap it. I call our listeners prodders. Let the prodders know, like, how you got into this, specifically the injury, because I'm reading it and I was like, I had no idea about that. I'm like, man, it was frightening.
Frightening. It
was frightening reading it. I can only imagine living through it.
Yeah, I mean that happened. I was into the same kind of thing, powerlifting and this and that, and as you know, like jiu-jitsu. I was doing jiu-jitsu like in the 90s. Like nobody did jiu-jitsu here.
Yeah.
It was a weird, like super weird time. So I went down to Texas. I taught martial arts at the university that I attended where I got my doctorate. Came back and there was just like a handful of people doing jiu-jitsu. So I was like found Mike Mijas.
Oh yeah.
And I found where they were and I was like, we have to get together. There's no one doing this. And he's like, oh, so we would train, and I found Tony Rinaldi.
Oh yeah.
Train with him, but I was doing powerlifting training. I was doing all this crazy stuff, and the enormous amount of, talk about it in the book, the mental emotional stress. I just got married. I was 6 figures in debt, student loans. Open my own office. It was just stress from like every direction. My grandmother recently passed away. My only grandmother that I had that I knew. All my other ones passed before I was born, and my grandmother on my dad's side passed when I was like 4. So I didn't really know anybody. But I grew up with her. It's on the Greek side, So I had just all this emotional stress, mental stress, and then physically beating myself up, with training. And not my wife, who's a chiropractor, would work on me, and she'd just be like, "Hey, you need to reel it back a little bit. Like, take it easy. Like, let your body, this will calm down. This will heal." And I never, as soon as I felt better, like we were talking about earlier, as soon as I felt better, I'd go head first into training, just go crazy, right? And then I would get, back to having it just felt like kind of like an ice pick type pain, like someone was stabbing me, like in the hip, So I thought it was like something I did, with training, but I went to a trip to Vegas. We did, my wife and I did at CEUs at that time, continuing education, where we did 300 hours within, it was a pretty short amount of time. I think it was within 14 months, something like that. but a lot of education, a lot of traveling. And I was in Vegas, and I just remember, like, I was in excruciating pain at the airport. I was laying on a bag of ice on the floor at the Vegas airport. Not a good place.
Ugh, dirty.
Yeah, nasty place, right? So I got home and then iced it, and I had my wife work on me, and a friend of ours who's been in practice a long time work on me. I felt a little better. Of course, went on the treadmill the following morning, like on an incline, doing some HIIT training, sprints, and then jog and sprint, and then took a shower, and yeah, what happened was I went to sit on the toilet. When I went to stand up, I couldn't stand up. I completely became paralyzed from my waist down on my left side, and I mean no movement at all. And I was just basically stuck on the floor in at the time it was my home office. We lived there and treated patients out of the front, and I never went up to work. Like, my wife literally adjusted all of my patients, all of her patients that morning. I realized, like, by the time she got out of catching up, she was wondering, like, what the hell's going on? Came downstairs all the way into the basement. I couldn't even scream. That's how much pain I was in. I was just like, like anything hurt, like breathing hurt. And she tried helping me, called 911, had an ambulance come, took me out on a stretcher. They took me to Trumbull. They would not give me an MRI at that time. They had given me some drugs for swelling, I think, and pain, and they didn't do anything. They gave me Percocet eventually. I was just completely, like, hopped up. I didn't know what happened. I woke up the next morning in a private MRI facility. My wife and one of my best friends at the time came and got me out of the hospital, like, in the middle of the night, like, against medical advice, took me to an imaging center because they said it was going to take 3 days to get an MRI through the hospital, and they were like, no way, we're waiting. You got to see what's going on. I had torn L5-S1 disc where the fibers were completely torn, and the stuff on the inside came out 17 millimeters, which is like, you get a disc bulge, most of them are like 2 millimeters, if it's pushing, and it's very uncomfortable, don't get me wrong, but this thing just pretty much exploded. And I went to Cleveland Clinic. The neurosurgeons were like, you have to have surgery, like, now. And my wife, who's very, she's Croatian, so super stubborn with what she believes in, and she said, if you can't walk in 6 weeks, then go get the surgery. So within 3 weeks, I was walking. Within 6 weeks, I was seeing patients again. 7 months later, had an MRI follow-up. Over 70% of that material that had herniated out had reabsorbed. My body basically healed itself. And, that was a very humbling experience. And it led me down so many paths as far as, being paralyzed like that in your late 20s. And thinking you're invincible at that time, it evoked a lot of things emotionally. One of the guys who helped me the most released stored emotions from my body. He did a technique called neuro-emotional technique. And I never forget it because when he did it, he said, this isn't your problem right now. I mean, we know what you have going on now, but because that isn't your problem. Your problem is when you were 7 years old, you had this traumatic experience related. In Chinese medicine, they relate emotions to organs. So, like, at that time, the kidney meridian, he said, was attached to a strong, like, deep-set fear. So kidneys and fear go hand in hand. So he did this thing where he stimulated the acupuncture points, like, around my kidneys, and the pain literally cut in half within 30 minutes after his treatment. So I said, like, what in the world? Because I was in excruciating pain at that time. I mean, I couldn't even. I was sleeping on the floor, peeing in a little mason jar. Like, I couldn't even move. I went home. I went back to my little cocoon on the floor, and this time when I peed, I felt like all this heaviness. He worked on my kidneys, so I didn't put two and two together at the time. But I felt all this heaviness in my bladder, and when I peed in this thing, it literally was about an inch and a half of this. It looked like pus, sediment, something, but the pain, the relief was just ridiculous. So I went back the following week, same thing happened, peed in the jar, more of this pus or whatever came out after his treatment, and the pain, like, at that time was probably like 60, 70%. I mean, like, I started to walk with a cane at that time. I was just, like, super impressed with whatever that was. So, like, this whole thing we were talking about earlier with the mental, emotional, not being separate from your physical body. And we were talking about the gut and the brain being interconnected. It just really fascinated me. So I started traveling all over the country, learning these techniques, because I said, if that saved me from having this neurosurgery in my 20s, and maybe never being able to train martial arts again or do who knows what, and got me back, I want to learn about this. So I made it my mission at that point just to start studying all this stuff, and I got certified in this neuro-emotional technique. Eventually developed my own technique that I've been teaching, I think, 16, 17 years now, all over the country, all over the world, actually, to doctors. The international place I taught was in Sydney, Australia. That was in 2016. I've taught Canada. I've taught all over the place, but it's just something that's passionate. It's exciting because you give people tools that they didn't have before to go out into their communities and help all their patients, people that I can't help where I am here.
Right.
But I could have a far-reaching
But you
effect.
are helping them through that technique.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Lenten time or anytime, Station Square Seafood is delivered daily and always prepared fresh every time. And now to go with your salmon, swordfish, or any favorite dish, Station Square's small batch signature seasonings. Lemon pepper, Cajun, or charcoal steak rub.
Need great food fast? Visit mysalvatores.com and order anything on our menu for a quick pickup. All of your favorites ready when you are. Specials available on mysalvatores.com. Order today.
With that buzz of select Brazilian Dolce coffee beans that brew Ipanema's seductively sweet beach coffee, they mingle a flawless measure of their crisp Darlene lager. Somehow, somewhere in a secret lab with modern methods, they blend a perfectly balanced, light, uplifting, gold medal winning brew known as the Percolator. Available at Modern Methods Tap Room or the new Darlene Lounge on Courthouse Square in downtown Warren. So the technique, is it like acupuncture?
It's
or acupressure?
Yeah. So we use a little instrument that stimulates nerve receptors 14 times per second. So it's a very quick stimulation, and then we use this here. I brought one with me, cold laser.
Are you gonna shock that thing with me later? What
depends. It depends how you act today.
Oh my god, man!
I'm not gonna wrestle with you, so I might use this.
Dude, that thing looks like a stun gun.
It's pretty cool.
Are those is that electro diodes on the top of it?
They're cold laser diodes on the top.
Wow.
And basically, you studied a lot of this biohacking stuff, so
yeah.
Mitochondria are really the key to energy production in our bodies, and and very much tied into how fast we age. So you can really change and improve mitochondrial function within 2 minutes of using cold laser over any tissue. We use it on the brain tissue a lot. We use it on heart tissue, but like a disc, for instance, if you injure yourself. I had a shoulder injury from jiu-jitsu, probably should have.
That's surprising.
Yeah, probably should have had surgery, but I mean, I'm almost at 100% now. I've been using the cold laser and a few other things, and it's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been excited about that stuff ever since, and it just pushed me down some paths that I know I would have never went down unless I was really pushed.
Did you think when you were lying on the floor in all that pain, and weren't able to move, and you were down there for hours and hours, did you think I might be dying, I might die here?
I was scared. I honestly didn't know what it was, because up to that point it was pretty manageable with my wife being a chiropractor and all that. And then this was pretty much just incapacitated. I mean, to the point where I almost passed out from pain, and I have a super high pain tolerance. Did full contact karate most of my life, and then jiu-jitsu the second half. You know how that goes.
Sure.
So it's I didn't know what to think. But it was a scary time, uncertain time. Yeah.
Before that happened, and before you kind of went on this path, did you? Because I'll talk to people sometimes, like you mentioned biohacking, right? And mitochondria especially, right? And so cellular aging takes place because we have, build up in our mitochondria. The mitochondria is not pushing out through cell membranes like the garbage, if you will, right? And we get oxidative stress, right? Oxidative stress on your cells causes your cells to age. and they're not. What did I think you said in the book? Like your cells are reproducing like you're producing new cells, 60 new cells a second or something along those lines.
It's an enormous amount of volume. Like I think it's the stat is like it's 60 million.
Oh, maybe that's what it was.
That turns over every minute or so.
Okay.
So it's constant turnover, and that turnover is based off of like this blueprint. In that blueprint, like you said, the more oxidative stress you have, it's like the crappier the blueprint is.
Yeah.
It's like it's all smudged up, and
right.
then the body's trying to make this essential core foundational, element, the cell.
The crappier the genetic blueprint is, right?
Yeah.
You're saying, yeah.
Yeah, so it's turning over cells that are suboptimal,
right?
Because you're going off of a weaker blueprint. So, you could take and shut off a lot of oxidative stress through using cold laser. We do a ton of clinical nutrition. We do a lot of herbal therapy,
sure,
homeopathic remedies. So basically any tool that I found like over the course, I've been in practice 24 years, that has been effective, where I get like reproducible results, that's what we use. And then like we kind of like formulate our protocols individualized, like we were talking about. It's for your patients now, and we know that the genetic makeup of that patient makes a big difference, because some people could tolerate certain things. Like you said, some people could detox a lot better through that cell membrane, like you were talking about. Other people, they don't have the genetics to absorb the B vitamins or break certain things down. They don't have the enzymatic capacity to absorb and utilize, so they can't pump stuff out as efficiently. So we have to know that, and then we customize protocols to help people not just get better, but really express more of their potential, stay better for the rest of their life. We show them how to do that as well. So getting well is one thing, showing you how to stay healthy. It's more like teamwork. Hey, here's what you do when you're not in my office. Here's some things you should focus on.
Right.
Those types of things.
It's not a quick fix. It's this is what I find is interesting. Because again, kind of go back to the biohack thing. I got involved with a company a couple years ago. I was doing some consulting work with them. And I went to one of their health seminars, their summits or whatever, and they're selling different products. I'm like, okay, this is, they're trying to sell their products. And there's a lot of scientific research behind it, not just from them, but, if you went to PubMed or you went to other places and kind of read some case studies, you're like, oh, okay, like ashwagandha and some of these different herbs. And this particular product, I was like, this was an FDA, the FDA approved their statement, right, which is a hard thing to do. That if you took this product, you would reduce your oxidative stress by 30% in 90 days or maybe 60 days. I should probably get my facts right, but right. It was a quick turnover. I'm like, well, what does that mean? So I went through and I took my blood pressure, I got my cholesterol checked, I did all these things like precursor before I took the stuff, and then I started taking it. And then I went back and my 90 days later. Actually, I think I did it 30 days later than I did 90 days. My resting pulse was lower. My blood pressure was lower. My cholesterol was lower. I don't have high cholesterol and that stuff anyways. I'm relatively healthy other than having UC. But I was like, oh, so there's some scientific, data that I can gather, minimally. But then also I noticed, man, I was sleeping better. I felt better. I was still indulging in probably too much alcoholic beverages at that particular time in my life.
Right.
I noticed when I woke up in the morning, man, I don't really have much of a hangover as much as I did in the past. Now the trick is just don't drink as much, dummy. You don't have to worry about the or at all. You don't have to worry about the hangover.
Right.
But when I was talking to friends of mine and having these conversations, and they're like, man, you look great, and what are you doing? I said, man, I'm taking this stuff, and there were other changes in my life too, because once you start getting healthier, then you feel like I want to continue this path, right? It's kind of like doing jiu-jitsu, right?
Right.
It's like you start doing jiu-jitsu and you're like, well, smoking and drinking probably doesn't go along with this lifestyle. Right. So I should probably just get rid of that. And right. I feel better not doing it. Not that I was ever a big smoker. I still like to drink a little bit. I still like to drink a little bit once in a while. But I was talking to my friends about it, and they were like, dude, this sounds like all horseshit, right? Because their understanding of medicine is like this idea that we mostly all understand medicine here in the United States. It's you go to the doctor, he asks you a couple questions, and then he prescribes you basically a Band-Aid to fix your problem in the form of typically pharmaceuticals, right? So here's a pill, here's a drug. I often go back and I think about when the FCC first allowed, and I don't know if it was the AMA or the FDA, but I'm sure they all got together because they all have to prove this, and they started to allow prescription drugs to be advertised on television. And, I come from a TV background and I come from a film background, but, I started thinking to myself at that time, this is not a good thing because I know how powerful that medium is. And when you do it wonderful, like Steven Spielberg will make you cry in a movie theater. You walked in happy and he turned these dials and rose the music at the right time and the imagery and pushed it on camera, and you all of a sudden you're crying because E.T. wants to go home and Elliot don't want him to, right?
Right.
So that's a powerful medium. And I'm thinking to myself, man, now they're advertising drugs on TV. This is not good. Everybody's going to, and this is exactly what's happened. Now that was probably 20 some years ago. Exactly. But now people go into the doctors and they're like, hey, I have acid reflux. I saw that super pill on TV that just came out. Can I get that?
Right.
And you're not really fixing whatever's causing the acid reflux or whatever your ailment is.
Right.
You're just masking the symptoms that are being caused by some deficiency.
100%.
So I love cracking the code when I first opened it up and read about your story. So I'm explaining all this shit to get to a question. And the question is, were you met with any or even self-skepticism? Did you probably through martial arts in the same way that I was talking about Wachi, is, your channels are open to that information a little bit, like this Eastern medicine or Eastern philosophy. But did you have resistance either personally or other people were like, oh, Andre, that's all bullshit. You got to go and, get a shot and you'll be fine, or get the surgery or get pills or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, definitely my brother had almost identical thing happen to him, and he went to that same neurosurgeon and had the surgery. And I mean, I was raised, my parents were factory workers, they worked at Packard Electric. So it's like, we had insurance that would pay for pretty much anything medical.
Yeah.
So I was on, repeat antibiotics growing up, constantly.
Likewise.
Recurring strep, ear infections. When that didn't work, tonsils removed, and I still got sick. That was supposed to fix everything, removing the tonsils, right?
Right.
So, typical medicine. You look at this. What you brought up is really interesting. Like, the statistics now, which are frightening, 75% of the world's pharmaceuticals are consumed here. And we are, 5% of the population?
Right.
How does that work? I mean, you kind of already hit on how it works and why it works, but it's a scary thing because, like you mentioned, it's not really addressing any kind of underlying cause. It's saying, this is my symptom, make my symptom go away. And nobody asks, well, my patients come in and they do ask these questions, they're a little different, but they'll be like, well, why did my cholesterol start going up? Or why did my blood pressure start going up? They start asking better questions, better quality questions. And then they understand, like if the medical doctor says, well, how long do I take this, blood pressure medicine? Well, you take it for
forever.
For the rest of your life. Well, wait a second. Like, I didn't have blood pressure issues when I was born. It's not like there's some kind of deficit of a drug. It's controlling a specific parameter of physiology, a symptom, but it's not getting into any of these underlying causes. So, yeah, definite resistance, but at the same time, I knew I didn't have as much faith as my wife, obviously. My wife was like, you're not getting surgery right now. If you're still paralyzed, yeah, then get it. But she was very principled in that. We had really good mentors that were really just efficient at helping unlock the healing potential. Because our bodies, like when I studied this in school, it was always wild that, you cut your finger and, you think, well, so what? Yeah, you get a scab falls off, you have new skin. Well, we have this book in school when you're doing this doctorate training. It's a physiology. Everybody knows it. Who's a doctor? It's called Guyton's Physiology. It's literally like this thick. Anyway, there are 2.5 pages of a clotting cascade that happens. I mean, there's so much intelligence in the body. Without anyone telling anybody anything, it lays down this mesh. It has this whole thing where the arteries around her, constrict down so you don't bleed out. It has, again, a whole process of, we call it in our background in chiropractic, how we were trained, it's called innate intelligence. It's inborn. So we look at what is interfering with the full expression of that innate intelligence? And it boils down to stress, like we talked about in the book, physical stress, chemical stress, and emotional stress. And that was written in one of the first chiropractic textbooks in 1895. The guy, D.D. Palmer, Dr. D.D. Palmer, he called it toxins, trauma, and autosuggestion. That was the terminology back then. And now we're seeing, you're talking about PubMed, man, you're seeing the science now back everything that we were talking about back then. And so it's super cool. Like now it's almost like there's people that want to get deeper, and that's why I think it's a great time doing this, because there's so much adversity out there in terms of not just physical, but the mental emotional stress is just through the roof. Chemical stress through the roof. We could talk about Roundup. We can talk about a lot of stuff, but it's insane that you look at that about 80 to 90% of our food supply is genetically altered now, which jacks our gut, our microbiome that we talked about, which in turn, when that gets irritated, it's immediate, the effect on the brain. We call it leaky gut, leaky brain. So if there's inflammation in the gut, you'll get brain inflammation almost immediately, and vice versa. They study concussions. You bonk your head, your gut gets leaky, and that's how fast this is. I mean, you're hardwired with what's called the vagus nerve. You have 10 fibers coming from your gut going up into your brain, and the brain does send signals down, but it's only 1 to 10. So 1 to 10 ratio. Gut going up to the brain, way deeper innervation neurologically. And that's why we see, when there's this disruption here, we can't expect the brain to work properly, and vice versa. So it's exciting. We know our immune system, 80% of it lives in our gut. So we know it's not just one thing. You were talking about how everything is interconnected. That's super important. Candace Pert, she's a Nobel Prize winning scientist. She called it psychoneuroimmunology. So, I mean, she really understood. This is connected to that. The neurotransmitters affect that. 85% of your serotonin is synthesized in your gut. These are brain neurotransmitters. So it's just wild. So we think about all these things. It really is all interconnected. So you can't just treat a symptom like we were talking about going into this and then expect, you're going to get strong and healthy from the inside out by taking more medicine that literally is just covering a symptom up.
Right.
It's not healing, because if it was healing, you would do a bout of that medicine, 10 days or whatever, stop taking it, and you would be healed. But you're not.
But there wouldn't be any money in that.
Exactly. You follow the money trail, right?
If you're looking to buy new or sell your current home or commercial property in Northeast Ohio or Northwestern Pennsylvania, look no further than Brokers Realty at brokerssold.com. Want to be debt-free faster, save money in taxes and insurance, and retire with more wealth? Call Zach Byler of Prosperity Partners Financial Solutions today for full-service financial advisory. 330-219-5225. Well, what's interesting is you brought up a lot of great points, one of which I did not know about the concussion deal, which is weird that I didn't know that, because years ago, we did some documentaries on traumatic brain injury and PTSD and among soldiers, and I learned a ton of information, which really kind of made sense to me. I had I think I went to the emergency room 4 times for concussions, but there were probably another 3 or 4 times that I didn't go, or I didn't have, I wasn't knocked out cold, or I wasn't, I didn't have trauma, or, like one time I'd go to get stitches. I got my head split open. Another time, you'd gotten into fights or playing football or just being a dipshit, and horsing around. And I can remember falling on my, I fell on my head one time surfing with Frank when we were in Rehoboth Beach. And I never knew that was an issue. So I traced back, how did I, and I've been candid about this on the show in other episodes, in particular with, there's an episode with Mike Polk, who's a comedian, and he also has ulcerative colitis.
Oh, man.
Now, where's the hottest place you ever take a shit, But
Right.
Prodigy, if you haven't heard that episode, you can go back and find it on the website. But I kind of pride myself in knowing as much about this disease as I can, but never knew that, because I would always connect it to, similar to you, man, a lot of antibiotics when I was a kid, like doctors doling out antibiotics. Had some acne as a kid, antibiotics, and then Accutane. And Accutane was a drug that they connected with people who had ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. Yes. In fact, there was a class action lawsuit that I was a part of. We lost, unfortunately, but that was a big thing. And I never realized the concussion aspect of that.
Totally.
Which makes sense, because when I start to have symptoms, I tend to get kind of depressed, which would make sense anyways, because you're like, oh, God, I got to go through this bullshit again.
Yeah.
But similarly, your emotional state, and we were talking about that before the show, several times when I had family members pass away, during or immediately following, I'd have a flare, and it would be severe.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of in both worlds. I know that there is a space probably for westernized medicine, but man, if you can avoid the symptoms, or if you can avoid the causes of those symptoms, or change your biome, and not only that, I liked how you talked about breathing in here. I wish I knew this like in my teens and 20s, especially in a sense. I think as men too, we're probably brought up as like, you don't have anxiety. Like there's no, just shake it off. We'd call it like stage fright. Even driving to places I didn't know where I was going. Like remember before you'd have like GPS, you'd be like, you'd have a map and you know where the hell you're going. I can remember driving your V8, your beta tapes to the station to drop your commercial off. Hey, this is going to air, for whatever it was. And I didn't label it as anxiety at the time. I just get like, man, I just feel like tightness and like, kind of, not the butterflies, not the good butterflies, but like you'd be like, maybe with age or maybe with experience, but certainly like the recognition of those feelings starting to come. I take a deep breath, man. I just become aware of it. Let me just relax a little bit. Exactly. And I think sometimes we, you mentioned like the chemical pollution, but the electronic pollution too.
Yes.
That we get, and not so much even from electromagnetic waves or electromagnetic frequencies, but the fact that we're always accessible, right? A phone call, a text, and we're trained to jump to that and answer it in immediate. And sometimes people are trained like, hey man, I text you 3 times. I'm like, I was reading Cracking the Code. Or I was like, was working out, I was walking the dog and I had my phone on me.
Right.
But we're so used to that. And those are other forms of stress that come in.
100%. And that's a lot of the newer research showing, which you're probably familiar with, like these algorithms.
But talk about it, because people listening might not be.
Well, the idea, it's dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter. Mm-hmm. So the dopamine's being just driven over and over and over and over. And in fact, pulling it away, like if I pull this stuff away from my kid, my 12-year-old, he gets angry. My son too. Just starts wants to flip out and stuff. And I said look, can't do that. This is, so I, as a parent, I know Yeah, is there information that is being probably embedded in this medium of social media, Instagram? For my daughter, who's 16, this whole thing with body image. I mean, she's talking about how she doesn't like her side profile. She's 16. I'm like, where are you getting this from? And it's from looking at this stuff through this filter and thinking that, that's influencing how we look at ourselves and how we interact with other people. And there's people now, because I take care of a lot of kids too, that come up and they cannot interact like you and I were talking. We're looking at each other. They can't even do that.
Yeah.
They'll start. You're talking about the anxiety you got, driving someplace. But I mean, they'll start to get anxiety because they have to be in another room with another person and not have a device.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally will start sweating, and they can't look at you in the eye, and they don't know what to do. They have, social anxiety is at an all-time high. And again, I think just the brain, it's just not normal for the brain to have that constant stimulus, that constant input, and the dopamine being driven over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's like a drug, right?
It's totally.
People get addicted to these things.
Totally, they are.
Scrolling. Oh, I got liked. Oh, that's a...
Yeah, they are. They are addicted for sure.
I'm guilty of it too, though, right?
Yeah.
I'm on there frequently. I have to do it for my job too, because we manage a bunch of accounts, but...
Right. Yeah.
I post pictures of my dog. It's probably one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah.
Everybody loves my dog. I love my dog.
Your dog's awesome.
I'll go back and I'll look. I'll be like, oh, man, look. Gussie got 25 hearts today. And you're like, and then you start to think about it, though, and you're like, that's the hook.
Yeah. Totally.
Pushing that dopamine, like you're saying.
Totally. And again, the brain we know now we call it plasticity. So it's amazing, like
neuroplasticity.
And my favorite terminology was an old, I say an old guy, he's not that old, but Dr. Joe Dispenza, you may have heard of him, but he talks about the neurons that fire together wire together. So whether it's social media, whether it's anxiety, or whether it's fear, or whether it's anger, doesn't matter. But if it's done repetitively, those circuitries in your brain, those firing patterns, you actually grow thicker neurons that support that emotion or that behavior.
So you want to keep going back to it.
So it's easier over and over. It's easier to get hairpin trigger if you're flying off the handle or whatever the case is. And the cool thing is because there's neuroplasticity, you could pull energy and attention away from that. Let's say it's anger. Pull it away and start counting your blessings, let's just say. And you literally, when you pull that away, if that thing's not getting fired at the same frequency, the body's like, why do we have to have such strong neural connections for anger if Jim is now spending more time doing a gratitude journal or whatever he's doing, but he's not feeding this? So it will start disassembling. And it'll literally get weaker and weaker. The neurological circuitry and connections will get weaker and weaker and weaker the more you pull your attention away from it and drive it in towards other things. I'm using gratitude because that's how we train our patients. Appreciation, gratitude. Those are some of the more powerful. You want to change your biome and your microbiome and your biochemistry. That stuff changes your heart, your brain, your immune system, your cortisol. And this is another thing, like cortisol, they measure when there's excess cortisol, whether it's being constantly bombarded with social media or any other perceived stressor. We know that fight or flight from the old-fashioned biology in 6th grade, which is, hey, saber-toothed tiger's trying to eat me, I got the fight or flight. That's supposed to be short-term. The issue is it's staying turned on constantly. And that excessive cortisol, it doesn't just mess with our brains, it destroys neurons, but it is like miracle grow for the bad stuff in your microbiome, in your gut. It literally is miracle grow for pathogenic bacteria. We call it small intestinal bacterial and fungal overgrowth, parasitic infections, and all these other things that, we can have a symbiotic relationship in our gut. It's cool. But when they start outgrowing the good and shadowing, crowding out the good stuff, it causes severe issues, not just with the immune system, but what we call autoimmune, which is, your immune system.
Body starts attacking itself.
It says, hey, you kind of look like a bad guy, even though it's healthy cell tissue. It might just be inflamed cell tissue, and the body can't distinguish the difference because of that imbalance in that microbiome and those stress hormones driving this the growth of the bad guys. So you were talking about breathing, which is like you were talking about wish you knew now what you knew then or whatever. But like, man, I'm still learning about this stuff. 2 years ago, you reminded me, I was competing. I compete still in jiu-jitsu. I know we're old. We shouldn't be doing this anymore.
You're crazy, man. I love it, though.
But I went to the Nationals. This was in 21, sorry. And 2 weeks before that, I competed at the Arnold Classic. I had such freaking anxiety because it was the first time that all of my teammates, my son was competing on the same day. My wife was there. My neighbor was there because his little girl competes too. All my coaches were there. And I'm old because I fight all the way at the end of the day. Everyone else is done fighting, and then, so it's like all eyes on you. I was so freaking nervous, so much anxiety. I couldn't even eat. Like, you're supposed to eat before you compete. Like, you shouldn't be going there on like low blood sugar, right? I couldn't even eat. So anyway, I competed. I said, this is ridiculous. I'm like, well, pushing 50, like what the heck's going on? So I started taking the breathing practice more serious. 2 weeks later, I went to Vegas, competed at the Nationals. The only thing I did different was dedicate more energy and time to my breathing practice. And I had no anxiety. I mean, it was crazy. And it was way higher level competition. Nationals, like everybody's there, and it's like it's on Flow Grappling. It's like live streamed to the world of grappling. It's like, holy crap, I'm like, man. But I had no anxiety, and it's like regulating your own. You were talking about cortisol, or the stress hormones and anxiety and these feelings we get, and how when you have these emotions, you can feel, your mental isn't the same. So it's so cool that you could, Again, that's why the first chapter is like you're in your driver's seat. You're in the driver's seat. You control not just like your chemical states and like the food you put in and the thoughts you have, but you can control a lot more. You can control what's called, talking about epigenetics. So you can literally control shutting the volume down, turning it almost off on genetic expression of something like Alzheimer's, for instance, versus turning it on full blast and allowing this disease to wreck your life. There's now PubMed in 2016, there's now full-on data showing that you can shut that genetic, even though you have 2 copies of that gene, one from your mom, one from your dad. You're supposed to get Alzheimer's. There's a 90% increased risk when you have 2 copies. But you can literally shut that completely down to where it never has to affect you.
How do people do that?
Super cool. I teach like 12-hour courses on this to doctors, but basically there's 36 things that you measure, mainly in the blood, like blood sugar, for instance. Insulin is a driver. Low vitamin D is a driver. What's called high sensitivity C-reactive protein, which is an systemic inflammatory marker. That's a driver. Homocysteine, which is a sticky film that builds up on
I'm
your
glad
arteries.
you're covering all these things. These are all on my notes.
Are they?
I was like, oh, thank God he's going to say all
Yeah,
this stuff.
because when I wrote that in 20, that I published it, they now have that this neurologist has proven that the same things I talk about in that cardiovascular chapter are the same things that will cause dementia and Alzheimer's, the exact same markers. So this stuff, homocysteine, abnormal thyroid function, autoimmune markers, all of these different things. Your omega-3 fatty acid to your omega-6. Omega-6 is all that crap that's in the refined vegetable oils. Super inflammatory.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, well, I'm eating low fat. But no, you're eating like corn oil, like things that are highly processed and inflammatory. But that omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is huge. The amount of zinc versus copper, the ratio should be 1-to-1. If you have higher copper than zinc, you can turn on this epigenetic trigger of Alzheimer's. And not only Alzheimer's, there's a lot of other diseases that follow this same thing. They specifically looking at the gene for Alzheimer's. So those are some of the things. Infections, like we're talking about fungal overgrowth or mold exposure, for instance. That's another biggie because we live in Ohio. You have these buildings and we have basements, and there's a lot of that stuff. And it just goes like on and on, but the bottom line is now there's very specific, and this neurologist, he's researched this stuff and he done both, the Western and the non-traditional. And the cool thing is like, he saw over 230 drugs come to market and fail miserably for Alzheimer's treatment. This guy says, okay, let's look at it from an individual treatment standpoint. Let's measure 36 parameters. Let's say in you, we found low vitamin D and high inflammation. And if I treat just those in you, it will shut that expression of that disease off. Now, I might take the same test, have the same genes as you, but mine might be like thyroid. My thyroid might be messed up, and I have high homocysteine. If he treats that in me, and let's say my insulin spikes are too high, and he treats that in me, that shuts the gene off the same way it shuts it off in you, but it's individualized. It's customized for you, for your genetics. And how you know is you recheck on the blood. It should drop, homocysteine, let's say, is at 12. It should drop down to 6. Like if you're doing the proper intervention, customized for you, So that's kind of, we do it now they call that functional medicine. That's the new fancy terminology for this. But we've been reading blood work and doing genetic stuff and testing all these parameters for a long time. But this guy really organized a lot of it and put it to the test by taking people full-blown Alzheimer's people and reversing them. I mean, literally getting their brains back, which is amazing. You
mentioned homocysteine. How does one have too much homocysteine in their blood?
Typically, it's a genetic variant called MTHFR. A lot of people have heard of this. If you've seen some of these studies with, we call it methylation. It's a fancy term talking about oxidative stress. Well, anytime the DNA gets damaged, you should methylate that to where you don't have oxidative stress and you don't make crappier copies because that blueprint being smudged. Now, what they're showing with all this stuff is it's amazing because if you have that genetic variant, you don't have the enzyme to convert folic acid to folate. So that's a B vitamin. So vitamin B6, vitamin B12, and folic acid, if you get them in the pre-digested forms and you give them to someone who has high homocysteine, within 10 weeks, it'll be normalized. I mean, it's that fast. It's like super cool. Like once you understand some of the mechanisms of absorption and utilization and how those key nutrients for that individual drive all these other processes, brain function, liver function, detoxification. Homocysteine is just like a side effect. You just see that sticky stuff come right out of them, which is really cool. So anyway, it's neat. It's neat. Each thing is different. Homocysteine is just one of those things that are really has made it to the forefront of the research because it used to just be linked to cardiovascular disease back in the day. 94, I think it was discovered, and they said, well, every 3 points above 6, you increase your risk of dying of a heart attack and stroke by 30 to 40%. And these are just like small numbers. And it's sad because if you look at like blood work nowadays, the range is still really not reflecting the research. It'll say something like 0 to 18 or 0 to 15 is normal. There's no research showing that. Everything shows like as you start going above 6, your likelihood of getting diseases gets higher and higher. They haven't changed that with vitamin D either. They say 30 is the low end of normal and 100 is the high end of normal.
It's a big range.
Huge range. And anyone under 50, for instance, with Alzheimer's, you turn Alzheimer's disease on when you drop below 50. So all the research for autoimmunity and all this stuff is way closer to 100 as far as therapeutic levels of vitamin D. Nobody checks this stuff. No one changes this stuff. It's just stuff that has been studied. People take the time to see what influences, what shuts disease expression off, and what gets these immune markers to improve. And, it's cool because we have some stuff like PubMed. We have these researchers that will take their entire life's work and put it into, let's say, a book or, publish it in a journal, like a medical journal.
Sure.
Like the journal Aging, the guy I'm talking about is Dale Bredesen. He's an MD. He's the one who first started reversing all this stuff, but he's not using medicine to reverse Alzheimer's. It's crazy. He's literally getting to the cause, and he's treating individual cases. And he's saying, look, we all need to move more. again, the more you move, the more brain-derived neurotrophic factor you make, the stronger your neural connections are. So I'm going to keep training. I'm going to keep moving because I know, like, it's so good for your brain. Like you were talking about doing jiu-jitsu with your eyes closed and just feeling that kinesthetic, that energy, that push-pull energy. It's so good for you, you know, and you learn new technique and you get put in positions that you've never been in before. It's like your brain has to constantly play chess all the time.
That's what I love about it.
Oh,
yeah.
me too.
Yeah.
Me too. I mean, it's literally, you talk about an addiction. I mean, that's like, I come off the mats. It's like, man, my brain feels so good. I can handle stress so much easier in my life.
Yeah.
You know, coming off those mats. So it's like similar. You know, we understand that there's, you know, there's chemistry and there's things that happen in our brains. And this guy, you know, he proved it, and we're starting to really understand, you know, we really need to look at it from a customized standpoint. We can't just do the one-size-fits-all anymore. Again, will that work with a lot of people, just kind of generally giving them advice? Yeah. Hey, get off your butt and move more. Yeah, that's good. Or, hey, maybe take a good fish oil. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. But you really don't know where you stand until you kind of quantify some of this stuff and say, hey, you know what, for you could be focusing on 18 different things, but for you, these 3, that's what I would do the next 90 days. How are we going to know it works? We retest after 90 days.
Yeah.
And that's how we've run our, you know, kind of our practice for years now is based off of that model of saying, hey, let's see what works and let's see what your body is telling me, because the body will tell you a lot of stuff. You know, it's neat. Like we look at sweat gland activity, which is a stress marker. We look at just a whole bunch of different parameters in a person. We can look at something called heart rate variability. You might have heard of that, but it shows you if you're stuck in that fight or flight or not. Your heart has like the gas pedal, and so does your gut. The gas pedal or the brake. Like fight or flight is like sometimes the gas pedal gets stuck under the floor mat, man, and you just going all the time. And I've had yoga people come in and, no, I meditate and I do this. And I go, okay, well, let's wire you up. And that's your heart right now in full on fight or flight. And they're like, well, I'm sitting in the pose and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Then I show them, like, I direct it more towards energy, more towards like, hey, feel this area around your heart. Bring your attention into this and bring your breath into this. And I'll redirect them a little bit. And all of a sudden they're like, what just happened? You know, I feel relaxed. And you see their fight or flight shut completely off. And same thing with the cortisol. So they've done studies with cortisol levels based off of HRV. 20-minute session of HRV will give you 24 hours of lower cortisol. So it has like this whole spillover effect, which is really cool. So sometimes, you know, for some people, like, look, get yourself a little HRV that plugs into your iPhone, clip it to your earlobe, and just check in, see where you're at. Like, if you're just, you know, fight or flight all the time, man, you got to break that pattern if you really want to heal from the inside.
Yeah.
Or just cover up the symptoms like you talked about. Go get some over-the-counter drugs or prescription drugs and just cover up the symptom. But for us, it's always been about finding the root cause and then teaching people how to stay well and balanced for the rest of their life.
Well, a lot of people, they don't want to make the commitment because it's too hard, or it's too, maybe it comes from a lack of discipline, maybe it comes from a lack of understanding. I like how in the book you're putting the patient in the driver's seat. They're in control. Today, went to the doctors, went to the dermatologist 7:30 this morning, and so I have this steroid induced rosacea, right? Came off prednisone, face broke out. Yeah, I'm going to the doctors. What do I need? What kind of stuff can you give to me? And she said, well, I can give you an antibiotic and that will probably take care of it. But you have, and of course I know this, you know, you have UC. So will that bother you? And I said, yeah, I'm not going to take the antibiotic. What's the next treatment? You know, we can make those choices. We don't always have to do, I'm not giving, here's the disclaimer, I'm not giving medical advice.
Right. Check
with your general practitioner or whatever, but
right.
You're in the driver's seat as a patient, right? You can choose, just like you chose, hey, I'm going to hold off on the surgery and let me see if I can heal this another way, rather than getting cut or getting the pills.
Right.
So, today she prescribed me a topical, already starting to heal a little bit, changing the diet up a little bit. Okay, let me see how I can manage this, right, without the Band-Aid.
Right.
But a lot of people, unfortunately, want the Band-Aid because it's less work.
Right.
Unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is they get a Band-Aid for that, and that particular Band-Aid causes them 2 more problems.
Right.
And then they get put on 2 more pills, and now all of a sudden they're on 15 different medications.
It's true.
For one problem, but that one problem,
right,
triggered, and they didn't change their lifestyle. Are you still eating, high processed foods? Are you still smoking? Are you still living a sedentary lifestyle? Did you change those things? No. Well, fuck, then you're not going to get any better. You just got to keep taking these pills.
100%. I mean, and that's, I think, one of the things like you touched on, which is kind of cool. Like, people, I think, aside from just like a discipline thing, I think it's also overwhelming. Like,
sure,
the old familiar, like you were talking about growing up in a medical. You got this, you go to the doctor, they give you that. I grew up like that too. So I think like that's the comfortable approach, but then I also think like
it's easier.
It's easy, it's familiar.
Yeah.
I think it's familiar because like when they come in to see us, because we take care of a lot of like a wide array of people. When they come in, it's interesting because if you can make it simple for them, like this thing that's simple yet effective, I think that's a key too, because then it like I always tell my patients like, hey, the proof's in the pudding. Here's what's gonna I'll predict what will happen. Do I know exactly how it's gonna happen? No, but I'll say, hey, by tomorrow you're gonna feel like this. 2 days from now, especially after cold laser, I tell people within 48 hours you will feel what I'm talking about. It isn't like I wonder if this is working or not. It's like this is how it's gonna unfold. I think keeping it simple and directing people to what they need at that time, like what the priority is at that time. Once they kind of see that, oh my goodness, this is a different way, yet it works, it's very effective, and I didn't have to go my regular route, then I kind of build this thing like, if I see you once a month, for instance, like what's the one thing you can do in between our visits during that 4 weeks? And I try and find like the simplest thing that will give you the most payoff. And maybe it is taking an herb like you were talking about, maybe ashwagandha or something like that. Maybe that's what it is. Or maybe, like you said, getting off your rear and going for a walk, like walk your dog once a day or something. Maybe it's something that simple. But I have them choose. I'll give them a couple choices. Hey, you can do this. You could clean. Yeah, maybe instead of eating this every day for breakfast, switch it over to this. A little, a little healthier for you. What people think health food is just ridiculous.
Yeah, that multigrain Eggo waffle might not be what you need.
The chicken sandwich at Burger King.
Oh,
I literally have people tell me that's the healthy choice they went with today. I'm like, oh boy. But most of my patients are.
Well, I ate some French fries. I got my vegetables in.
Yeah, they're well. Most of my patients now are pretty well educated. They've read the book. They have a good background and whatnot. But I think traditional medicine, like we were talking about, I think there is a time and place. I think it's I look at it more like emergency care is definitely like they shine there. You fall off a roof, man, and your bone's sticking out. Like, go to the hospital, right? Like you're having a
ashwagandha is not going to help.
No, a stroke or this or these crazy emergency surgeries that they can pull off nowadays. It's amazing, the technology, the diagnostics, and all that stuff. I think that's all cool. But when it comes like, hey, this is going to be your lifestyle, they're applying like this emergency care to like, oh, we could treat everything now. There's no gray area. You're either 100% healthy or you're all the way sick. There's none of this gray area. That's how they look at it. Like, you're sick, you're not. Oh, it didn't show up on any of my annual physical tests. You go in for your annual. Right. Oh no, everything's perfect. The next year you're not. Like you didn't have like a decline if you would have looked at it a little differently. Like you would have seen this coming, especially if you did like some of the genetic testing we talked about. Like you would know. Like this is a very strong predictor. If you keep doing what you're doing with this genetic makeup, this is probably what's going to happen. You could predict it pretty accurately. It's just that hasn't been incorporated into mainstream medicine yet. So, that's what we've been working on.
Well, unfortunately, it's probably because of, like we said earlier, the money trail. There's not a there's not long-term revenue in a cure that can be had for $30 at the grocery store or at the vitamin shop or whatever.
Right.
This is what I like about the book and what you're saying and this philosophy is you're doing preventative maintenance. If you look at it that way, you're driving your car, you got to put windshield wiper fluid in it. You got to change the oil every 3,000 miles or 5,000 miles or 6,000 if you're putting synthetic in, whatever.
Right.
You got to put air in the tire. You got to change the air filter.
Right.
You got to rotate the tires once in a while.
Exactly.
If you don't do anything of those things, your car's going to fall apart. Same thing with your body.
No doubt.
In your book, I'm going to say it again, Cracking the Code by Dr. Andre Camelli. We're going to tell you where you can get it before the show's over, but you talk about a lot of things that I've written down, and these are like simple steps that people can employ. They're not complicated things. They're not massive commitments, because I think people sometimes are hesitant to change, like we talked about. But like you talked about step-by-step movement patterns. Just the motion of standing and walking and using a trampoline, a rebounder, and HIIT training, high-intensity interval training,
Yes.
resistance training with benches, and like simple exercises, basic exercises. Bench press, if you didn't have a bench press, push-ups, rows, squats. Talk about some of these things. In particular, I guess, like the rebounder, the trampoline that so many people have, right? You think it's just a kid's toy. Oh, I bought a trampoline for our son, and he goes out there. We bought a trampoline for my son, and he goes out there. But I go out there and jump on it, right? What does that do for the body?
It's amazing. I mean, it's stimulating the brain, number one. Like that's I think what most people don't understand is the amount of space dedicated in your brain just for standing. Like you talked about how much like sitting is the new smoking, like how much change happens when you stand. Like your brain has to do a whole lot more. It gets a lot more input from the environment when you're standing. And then if you go on a surface that's not a solid surface like our floor here, like if you go onto a trampoline where there's motion in that floor, like I'll have people who sit a lot sit on one of those physio balls, because there's motion. It's not static. And anytime there's motion, you're stimulating, we call them mechanoreceptors, or receptors that basically, when they're fired, when they're stimulated, they send and supercharge your brain. Specifically an area called the cerebellum. Anyway, without getting technical,
get nerdy. It's okay.
Yeah, like the cerebellum then relays more energy into all these other parts of the brain. So it's like a relay station. So the more you can get information into the cerebellum, the more it relays over to these other parts of the brain, the ones that are incorporated in learning. And like we talked about, making new connections and all these other cool things. So moving and bouncing up and down, I mean, yeah, are you going to stimulate blood flow? Yeah, like lymphatic. Now, the lymph system doesn't have a pump like the heart. So when you bounce and move, you're stimulating lymphatic flow. And why that's important is that filters all the garbage out of your blood. You're talking about getting it out of the cell. You got to get it out of the blood, because even if the cell pumps out the crap, it has to get filtered out through your lymphatic system. So like movement, skeletal muscle contraction and movement and walking is the only way your lymph system moves. It has no other pump. Your heart pumps blood around all the time. It's a big muscular pump, right? But the lymph system doesn't. So just stimulating lymphatic flow is huge. And now they're linking, we were talking about Alzheimer's earlier, they're linking we call it the glymphatic, the G lymph. Which is so cool. When you drop into deep restorative sleep, there's glial cells in your brain that will contract, like you're wringing out an old dirty sponge, and get all the debris out of your neurons and clean the bath that bathes in. So it bathes in like cerebral spinal fluid. It's like a buoyant fluid in there. So imagine that lymphatic system. Your brain has its own lymph system dedicated to it. And if you're not dropping into deep restorative sleep regularly, you're not cleaning the debris out of your brain all the way. And then it accumulates. And then you accelerate dementia and cognitive decline and all these other things that we talked about. So it's like, man, It's like a simple step, you know. We were just talking about lymphatic function, but man, it's huge. Good quality sleep, getting people to go to the bathroom regularly. You know, like these things people I think take for granted. You know, moving, going to the bathroom, you know, eliminating your bowels regularly, and getting deep restorative sleep. Like if we always start like real basic, get people sleeping really well, we can move on to other stuff. Sometimes there's bigger fires we have to put out right away, but I always go back to like, hey, you know, I ask like you said, you ask a lot of questions when you're get to know a client or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I ask like over 100 plus questions on my initial intake, and I'm just like, you know, when I say go to the bathroom, I'm not talking about a little pellet or like, you know, on the opposite, you know, where you're having to go 10, 20 times before lunch. I want to know what's up because that, you know, in quality of sleep, getting to sleep, staying. I have trouble getting to sleep. My brain keeps racing. There's other people. I fall asleep great, but I'm up at 2 a.m. with anxiety and I want to eat and I can't get back to sleep. So they have sleep interruptions. They have, you know, sometimes they have both, and they all mean different things. You know, like clinically. They mean different things. Energy. Are you slow starting in the morning or are you crashing in the afternoon? I look to see if it's an adrenal function or if it's blood sugar going up and down too much. And there's all these, if you ask the right questions, it almost becomes like a template. Like we were talking about it in the book, there's these little questionnaires at the end of each chapter.
Yeah,
well,
it's so cool.
I go through the whole thing when you come in as a patient, and I just basically say, hey, like, tell me what's up. What about this? You know, well, I get headaches, but that's normal for me. I've had headaches my whole life. Yeah, it might be common, but it's not normal to have headaches every day or twice a week even at that. You know, so I'll ask lots of different questions, and it'll point us into a really detailed game plan, because it usually points at where the underlying problem is. Because the symptom, like I said, it's just telling you kind of like your body's just check engine soon lights. And because it's annoying you, what do? You put a Band-Aid over some electrical tape. I don't want to see that light flashing. It's annoying. Right? No. Why is it flashing? You know, why is your body telling you these things? It's telling you these things because there's some imbalance, right? You don't have to wait for it to develop into some kind of disease process where it's degenerated to the point where it's really hard to get your health back. You know, like, yeah, I tell people, how long has that been going on? Well, yeah, it's been going on since 12. Yeah, okay, so you're 42 now? Okay, so you're just now starting to understand your body was telling you that way back. And it doesn't take that many years to get well. You know, it's really like we talked about, you know, turning a switch on and off. And genetically, that's how that works. It's like epigenetics. You can change the environment, you can change the input coming in, and you literally can turn on a gene that has not been turned on ever and that expresses more health, more vitality. And by the same token, you can shut off disease-expressing genes just like that. I mean, they've done studies on prostate cancer where they had the guys just eat cleaner, more vegetables, and just go for a walk every day. They down-regulated or shut off over 500 cancer-expressing genes in less than 6 weeks. And I mean, it's crazy when you look at how this stuff actually works. You know, it's like literally minute to minute. They can turn it on, turn it off, based off of what we're doing with our life, with our patterns, with our thoughts, whether we move, what we eat. All those things are super important. So, but we take one baby step at a time when we approach patients. You know,
We were just talking about diet and foods and toxins. You know, eating or being exposed to environmental toxins. And I was reading in the book about how they took toxins from the fetal cord blood. They took a fetal cord blood sample and they studied it. I think it was the Environmental Working Group. This was at least what I wrote down.
Yep.
And they showed that 250 toxic chemicals were in this baby pre-birth. The baby hadn't eaten anything. It was only getting nutrition from the mother.
Yeah.
And those type of things, how do we, as a society, how do we combat something like that? Removing those toxins or at least limiting our exposure.
That's great. I mean, it's sad, but that's the reality of it. You know, we're inundated with we have our food supply. Okay, that's obviously, like you were saying, people ragging on you for buying organic food.
Oh yeah.
I mean, really,
like, it's like 30% more.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, man. But you ever read that list, the Dirty Dozen?
Yeah.
Like I take that stuff to.
That's the Environmental Working Group. They came up with that.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So it's awesome. Yeah. The fact is that you could pick and choose what you put into your body, right? How well you detoxify, like that's another thing we look at. So we look at it two ways, like what you're putting in and how well you can detoxify. So I'm always using this cold laser over the liver. I'll show you what it looks like here. So you can improve what's called glutathione, which is your master antioxidant, lots of different ways. Like I'm lasering over my liver here. That's going to increase glutathione and ATP production and improve detoxification. So I laser almost everyone's brain when they come in, and almost everyone gets their liver lasered because of how much toxic exposure we have. Because if we can just put energy into a tissue that's already burdened and fatigued from trying to filter all this crap out that we're exposed to, the food is just something that we can choose whether or not we put garbage in, right? But we have our environment that we live in. Let's just say we live in Ohio, right? Like when you go outside, there's a level. You've seen the air quality, that we've been exposed to, but I'm just saying in general, there's lots of stuff out there in our environment that we don't have control over. It's not like I can choose to buy organic produce. I can choose to go here. No, when you go outside, we have to then make the organism stronger, which is the human, because everybody's getting exposed to a certain level of toxicity just in our environment. So we have to make our body cleaner and more efficient as far as handling toxins. And sometimes that is giving nutrition that helps get rid of this stuff. A lot of this stuff, unfortunately, is estrogenic, which is bad for men and women. A lot of people are like, and kids, obviously. A lot of this stuff's estrogenic. So we do things to help the liver detoxify estrogen. We call it xenoestrogen, or synthetic toxic estrogens. And that's something that I do a lot of. Now, in men, if estrogen toxicity gets to a certain point, you end up accumulating it in the prostate and developing prostate cancers. That's what it's linked to. In women, you've heard the BRCA gene. The BRCA gene gets turned on. You end up hyperestrogen states affect breast tissue, so breast cancer. So we see, again, genes connected to this, and then I have things like, we have one product that basically is juiced Brussels sprouts and kale, has a chemical called indole-3-carbinol. Indole-3-carbinol rapidly accelerates, grabs onto the bad estrogen, so your liver could process, break it down, and eliminate it, so it doesn't bioaccumulate in these tissues like the breast tissue or the prostate tissue. So sometimes we do that proactively. Obviously, sweating and moving your lymphatic system and getting rid of toxins that way is good. Drinking clean water, more easier said than done.
I was going to say, talk about that for a second. How does one build up these estrogens? Like, is it through plastics like the BPA in
plastics and Roundup? Are huge. A lot of the things we use, unfortunately, like furniture and carpet, outgas what we call VOCs, volatile organic compounds. A lot of those are estrogenic. If we're using sprays for mosquitoes and roaches, and we're using Raid, and or we have a company that come to spray somewhere. All this stuff is estrogenic. So, people are, don't eat soy because that's highly estrogenic. Well, yeah, I agree there's phytoestrogens in soy, but that's not where this stuff's coming from. It's coming from all this synthetic garbage, that we're exposed to on a regular basis. So I do proactively, I'll take certain things, or when I make my shake, for instance, I'll put the Brussels sprouts and kale that's juiced and dried. I'll put a scoop of that in to drive detoxification, lasering the liver and doing these things just to keep it going.
Is that laser similar to like red light therapy? Is that
infrared is a little different than that. Cold laser works directly on the mitochondria. The infrared, you get some stimulation, but it's more of a surface stimulation of nitric oxide. This will penetrate through like the skull, like through bone, because it's coherent light. So the waves, the photons are super organized to where it can penetrate bone. So you can get good brain activation using cold laser. Again, could you do infrared on the brain? You can. You won't get the same effect. So I use infrared in my office, and I'll use cold laser. So I'll do both a lot of times. But for certain things, I use cold laser The brain is just one of those.
Is that relatively new technology?
This company,
because not that I'm an expert, I've never heard of it.
Yeah, so this company holds. You were talking about how hard it is to get FDA clearances. Holds 21 out of 23 FDA clearances because of the research in PubMed that they've done. I mean, it's just an enormous amount of research. I'm talking everything from Parkinson's to Alzheimer's to low back pain, to like plantar fasciitis, carpal tunnel. They have a violet one that destroys the fungus that causes toenail fungus, and you were talking about like acne. There's a bacteria called Acne vulgaris. The violet, the 405 nanometer, will destroy that, and it's FDA cleared to treat it. So it's really like I have some violet lasers, and I have some this one is just 635. It's red, and though each wavelength does a little bit different as far as what protein in the mitochondria that it stimulates. They've done just this type of lasering, for instance, to the brain. 4 weeks increase ATP production by 22% in the brain.
ATP production is your energy source, right?
Right. It's in your mitochondria. So why we target the brain tissue? It's one of the densest mitochondrial populations in your body. Your heart and your brain and your eyes, I think, have the most mitochondria. So we target tissues that have a lot of mitochondria but are really important tissues. We laser the gut. You're talking about like gut inflammation. I mean, lasering the gut is something that is really cool that we do. We do a lot of cool things like that, in office. But then, like you were talking about glutamine and some other nutrients to help repair gut lining or maybe bring inflammation down. Yeah, you can do that when you're not in the office. These are some, and we'll kind of guide you as to, hey, these are probably the most effective things you can do when you're not here. But when you're here, this is the most effective stuff we can do. So we do a lot of hands-on stuff, acupressure. We develop a technique called quantum integration. So it doesn't just like physically release your body. It checks. We have a method of checking to see if it's physical, chemical, or emotional stress that is accumulated in your body. So we can release that as well. I tell you what, releasing emotional stress from someone is really a wild thing because they come off the table feeling like a weight is lifted off of their chest. They can literally breathe easier. I mean, they're a lot more relaxed when they leave. So that's kind of the methodology, hands-on versus here's what I do, here's what you do, and together we can get a lot more done if we work as a team. I can help coach you in certain things, but then, hey, when you leave, can't hold your hand, but I can double check with you,
Tell listeners real quick a couple of things that they can do, like shower filters and glass for drinking.
Right.
If we have some listeners out of state, out of country,
yeah.
What are some of those quick things? Air filters, this.
Yeah, I have
things to avoid.
Yeah, I have for in my house, I have what's called Austin Air. Austin Air is a hospital grade HEPA filter that you only have to change it once every 5 years, and it could basically cover a pretty big area. So if you're uncertain on the air quality in your house, or if you have, let's say, synthetic floors, you put in commercial vinyl. A lot of people are going with that now, but it does outgas. It has volatile organic compounds. Cabinetry and upholstery, a lot of the flame retardants have a lot of volatile and organic compounds.
Paints also, if you're painting your house.
100%. So
you can buy low or no VOC paint too.
Exactly.
I bought that for my son's nursery when he was a kid.
100%.
My wife's like, "What? That paint's like 3 times the thing." I go,
"It's worth it."
Yeah, right.
It's worth it. He's going to be bringing that in all the time.
We're already exposed to this stuff, but maybe he doesn't have to be exposed to it.
Not as much. And these are the things, like you don't know everything that's outgassing. You don't know if there's mold. You don't know if there's this. So clean it, make sure you have clean household air. As far as water goes, definitely drinking out of glass is always going to help you. So like if you're buying drinking water, like if you could find a company like Evian that and they do make it where it's in the glass. Glass is always going to be better. Finding a good spring that's not contaminated is hard to find, like really good spring water. You can find it. We use filtration systems in our house. I've gotten where it's super elaborate, going through multiple filters. I sometimes will use reverse osmosis. Sometimes, like for my espresso machine, I'll distill my own water. And distillation is great because it it takes out every possible contaminant that you can imagine, but it also takes out the minerals. So, if you're not big on supplementation, we have something called trace minerals that we give people. If you're distilling a lot, you need to supplement because you are not getting, unless you juice vegetables, where you're juicing celery and, these things that are mineral dense. You got to put minerals back if you distill. Distillation is good. But they have whole household filters now that you think once every 8 or 10 years you change it, which isn't bad.
Any filters that you like that are, not a whole systematic change? Like someone that's there, like people like, I'll get
Yeah, yeah. Like you could find the ones that clear a lot of garbage out, just like at Lowe's and Home Depot. I mean, it's just like the under the sink, and you use that obviously for the one you're going to be cooking with and drinking water or making tea or whatever it is you're going to do. At least filter to that level. I tell people it's basic, basic filtration. I don't think you have to get ultra fancy with that. But yeah, definitely making sure you're eating, food, like real food. That's why I've put that chapter 11 where I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just so people understand, like, hey, you have to eat way more vegetables than you currently are. Like 8 to 12 servings a day is not too much. I'm still learning about this. Like, I actually had a coach. I hired a coach, and he was telling me how many vegetables I should be eating with every meal, and it even blew me away. Like I wasn't even eating enough, and I'm aware of this stuff, but I felt so much better listening to what he says, and I'm still doing that. I'm eating way more vegetables.
You ever do like the one I could think of, the brand name, the only brand name I could think of is like Athletic Greens, or do you ever do any of that stuff? Do you like any of that stuff?
I do. I have one that's called, a lot of my jiu-jitsu guys love this stuff. It's called Vita LF powder. And the only difference is that, it's a variety. It doesn't just have the greens, but it's organic and sprouted. The sprouting aspect, you get a little more nutrition out of it, but then they also have the dark reds like the pomegranate, the dark purples. It has everything. It's an all-in-one. It has some digestive enzymes in it. It has some beneficial probiotics in it. It has a whole slew of stuff in it. And I would put that that would blow away any multivitamin anyone could ever try and formulate because of all the different nutritional variants and all the antioxidants. It's just so much packed into one scoop of that, and it's probably one of the better tasting ones. Most of them taste like your backyard clippings,
Right.
It tastes horrible, but
Right.
I mean, this would actually taste decent, so I'll pop one of those in my shake, and if you don't want to do a powder, they do make that in capsule form too. So like if you just want to take it, you can just take it twice a day, but for me, just putting a scoop into my shake is easy.
You do that every day?
When I'm in the office, yeah.
Yeah.
At home, sometimes, or from traveling, it's a lot harder to do, but
Sure.
yeah, when it's there, definitely. I feel good doing that.
I recently, I've tried a couple different kinds, but I recently got one. I think it's called Uncaged, maybe.
Okay.
And it's the same kind of thing, like reds and purples, and man, does it taste way better than just the ones that are like a lot of those ones with spirulina or chlorophyll. It's like they can be a little
mess up your whole shake.
Well, it's just like, and then I'm always trying to turn my son or my wife onto these things too.
Right.
And they're like, oh, that's gross. I don't want to,
It's true.
I just want to drink some Gatorade.
It's true.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to taste good, and I do one recipe for the shake in there. You can easily add those green powders to that shake, and it tastes good. And they make them now like with monk fruit and raw cacao, chocolate.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, they didn't taste, when I first got into this stuff, man, they taste like garbage. Now they actually taste good. It's like almost like a dessert.
Remember you'd get like Joe Weider's like protein powder?
Yeah.
And that shit was
nasty.
Yeah, but you'd still eat it. You'd like, okay, because I want to be strong.
Yeah.
But now things, boy.
Oh, they taste so much.
I'm glad
better.
Yeah.
Yeah, they used to have that Metrix powder too. That would taste horrible. And I forgot what bodybuilder had the wafers that you ate that had the protein and some other stuff. And I was just like, I remember as a little kid, like looking at Arnold Schwarzenegger. I was like, yeah, if I eat enough of these wafers, I'll look like him.
There's a great documentary on Netflix.
Is there?
Like a 3-part 3-part series. Just came out.
I heard it just came out.
It's really good.
I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, the first episode focuses on his bodybuilding career, and the second episode focuses on his acting career, and the third episode focuses on his political career, and then kind of post-political career. He's a fascinating guy. It was a fascinating documentary.
Oh, for sure.
But I loved his constant positivity. You know.
Right.
Check it out. You probably will be interested, especially after reading this and kind of understanding, which I always knew you were into this, but this book is really interesting. Again, Prouders out there, it's called Cracking the Code, Unlock Your Genetic Potential. It's by Dr. Andre Camelli. And tell us where we can get this book.
The easiest place is Amazon, obviously. I don't know if they do the hard back books like how you have there.
Okay.
The last I checked, they were doing print on demand, so it was soft cover books. The Audible has the audiobook, and so does iTunes.
Oh, that's cool.
The guy who narrated the Bulletproof Diet, I got him to do mine. He's kind of like a scientific type nerdy voice, but it kind of fit pretty well. I like the job that he did, so he did that. He did the narration of the book, and he did a pretty good job, I thought. But yeah, if you want hardbacks, I mean, you can always just reach out and contact me at my office. We stock the hardback books.
Give our listeners your website.
Sure. It's lifequestwellness.com. That's my YouTube channel as well. If you look under Dr. Camelli Wellness Watch, I do have some of my lectures on there on diet, nutrition.
Oh, I'm gonna check those out.
Thyroid function. You talked about electromagnetic pollution. Things to mitigate exposure and that kind of stuff. I post some of that on my channel, and then I have like a lot of my favorite playlists, like the breathing and meditation. I'm sure people who like that have seen some of this stuff, but I have a whole playlist on cold laser, how it works, and some of the other things, how it affects the mitochondria. And then we're here, we're local, 24 years. We're North River Road, dead ends into 46. We've been there 20 that location 21, 22 years. So
yeah, so if you're in Northeast Ohio or Western Pennsylvania and you have any of the symptoms that we talked about, and you're getting fed up with Western medicine, or even if you're not, check out Dr. Camelli at his place. It's on 46, Route 46. So you can Google that and get the address. What did you just say? You just said something that was that's what I wanted to ask you. You said playlist. Here's just kind of a random question. I thought about it earlier, but I noticed when we were younger, I would train or listen to a little bit heavier music. I'd throw on some Rage, or I'd throw on some Metallica, or I'd throw on like just different stuff that was heavier, or gangster rap, or and I would you get pumped up, man. You're like, now if I listen to some of that stuff, I have like an aversion to it now.
Wow.
It's a different. I don't know if it puts me in a different mood, or it's just a different energy.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that at all, or do you?
For me, like it's really.
Do you think the music that you listen to affects some of that emotional?
100%.
Yeah.
It does. So for me, I try and pick stuff that reminds me of a time. If it is older music, a time where it was more feel good. Where you didn't have maybe some of the same responsibilities or cares. And sometimes I do that. Other times, I'll listen to something that is completely unrelated to anything, and it'll get me in a good state. But yeah, it's weird. It's definitely more customizable now. Like before, it was definitely pretty much the same stuff. Like you're talking about the same, and that's just you listen to that. I wrestled for a little bit, and that's what they would play in the wrestling room, or I did this, and it's just like that's what you listen to when you work out. Whatever, AC/DC and this and that, or I was like, okay, we always at jiu-jitsu, we always have, when it's open mat time, we always have different music. Some of the music I really like, some of it I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like probably not the best music to do jiu-jitsu with, you know? I mean, it's better than listening to the guy panning on you, breathing on you and sweating on you. So,
I think it's wild because when I listen to certain music, I feel Like, it puts me in a state of mind that is not the state of mind I want to be in anymore.
Right.
Even though I loved that music growing up.
Right.
We're like, oh man, like love rage.
Right.
If I listen to too much of it, I feel like I want to like rage, and that's not the space I want to be in anymore.
You're right. Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah, it definitely fires the same pathways, similar pathways. So if that's growing up, if that's what, you were thinking about doing most of the time, and it's going to put you into the similar, we call it neuroassociative triggers, right? Like Pavlov and his dog.
Yeah.
So that's something, obviously, if you don't want to be put into that, listen to something else.
Yeah.
Put you where you want to be,
If you want to, you had mentioned in the book there was a study that those who had like a positive mental outlook had a 17%, or maybe it was the reverse. Those who had a negative outlook on life,
right,
there were 17 times it was like a 17 times more likely to die early,
yes,
than not.
100%.
That's how my dad and I ended up having that conversation. We were talking about emotional strife in your health.
100%.
That mental aspect or emotional aspect can certainly cause physiological changes in your body if you're not aware of it.
It will outdo smoking.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about this, like statistically, like I think high blood pressure and smoking as a comparative in there, but it's like, man, you looking, constantly focusing on everything that's wrong all the time, you become, just like you were talking about with social media and these things, being addicted. You're almost addicted to that emotion of just whether it's anger, resentment, or some kind of victimization, or whatever that is that you're playing out. It's just like that almost becomes, you start identifying with that. And then the chemistry is toxic chemistry. It matches that. So we were talking about how the neurons fire easier the more you focus on that stuff. So it's like if it becomes like your thing. Everybody knows someone who's like that.
Oh yeah,
who's just like,
I'm thinking of somebody right now. Talking about it,
and it's like I call them like energy vampires.
Yeah, right.
Because my wife and I having a practice together, we're just like, if so and so, like I literally, like as I got older, I literally would refer patients like that to other doctors. And not because I'm mean or I don't love or care for somebody. It's more like I have to have enough to go around for everybody.
Right.
And man, it's just
you put your oxygen on first before you put it on the person going down in the plane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've referred many people out and over the years, and
I do that with clients sometimes too.
You have to at some point.
80-20 rule. My cousin taught me this 80-20
rule is where it's at.
Like, man, dude, when he told me that,
Boom.
I was probably like 35 at the time. I was like, whoa,
that's it.
That's a total game changer.
It is.
And it actually changed some of the structure of the business. I actually, especially when you're starting out, you're like, oh,
yep.
I don't want to lose that client because they're a revenue source. And so you're just,
right.
You take everything.
Yes.
And then at some point, you're like, man, I'm just spinning my wheels with this guy or that girl or whatever.
Right.
80-20 rule.
I
remember
works.
I lost 2 clients. I didn't lose them. I actually,
yeah.
I made it. I gave them a path to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I can remember telling, my wife, I said, yeah, I'm not going to be working with them anymore. She was like, oh, no, that's terrible. I said, well, it'll be okay. And literally a month later, I got a new client that that one client made up the revenue of both those clients.
Yeah.
And they were so much easier to work
Exactly.
for, which allowed me more time to go around and work for everybody. You felt better about it.
100%. And that's,
you don't want to go to a meeting and be like, oh man, I'm dreading this.
We talk about, well, I don't talk about it in the book, I don't think as much, but I teach my patients, at one point it was like every month I would have a new thing to teach them, but that was one of the things. It was like you're creating a vacuum when you're cutting off, I don't want to call it the dead wood, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But you create like a lot of the stuff's based off of fear, and then when you do it out of like care, hey, you'll be better served over here. You attract someone that's way more in line with where you are now and where you're going. Which is really cool. I mean, it's something that is so cool.
Yeah, we got to do it with people too.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to limit your exposure to people that are energy vampires or time vampires.
Right.
You ever spend time with somebody and you're like, oh my God.
Oh boy.
I could have had that conversation in 20 minutes, not 2 hours.
Right.
Man, I'm never going to get that time back.
Right.
As we get older, too, the window starts to become smaller,
It's
right?
true.
Like, I don't have as much time anymore.
No. You're more efficient.
Try to be more efficient.
Right.
Listen, I know you got to get out of here. I'd really appreciate you coming. Real quick, man, any future books, anything you're working on in the future that we should be looking for in the next year or two? Or
That is something I thought a lot about because
it's a great book, man.
Yeah, how the research changes. So I haven't quite nailed it down like I want to do this, but I'm still out teaching a lot, actively teaching. I'll be teaching this year, next year, quite a bit. I'm not going back to where I was pre-COVID. I was teaching 20 cities a year, which was just draining. So I'll probably go back up to about eight cities a year, 10 cities a year. But maybe as that quiets down a little, and again, if the research is exciting enough to where we can make an addition or an upgraded version of that, I think it's something that, the way it's going, the research is coming in so fast as far as this whole epigenetic field and customizing it for individuals and getting, unlocking people's potential in all areas of their life. It's exciting.
How long did it take you to write this?
About 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because
the reason I'm selfish purposes. Yeah. I'm writing a fiction book right now, man. Dude, it's taking a little bit of time.
Longer than I wanted.
I'm reading this. I'm like, man, this is so good. I wonder how long this took because it's really detailed.
Yeah.
And each one of these steps, listeners out there cracking the code, there's steps at the end that you take these step-by-step things to get to better health. You just make it. I think you've made it very accessible and very easy, which is what I like. But it's super detail-oriented. Mm-hmm. So 5 years makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Hey, Andre, Dr. Camelli, man, I appreciate you coming here today and sharing some time with us. I know you got to bust out. Love to have you on the show again another time. Maybe if we get an updated version, we do that.
Sure.
But appreciate you coming on today, man.
It was awesome, man.
Yeah.
Glad to reconnect.
Me too. Listeners, lovers, and friends, until the next time, I want you to stay electrified and be kind to one another. You can always check out more episodes on theprodcast.net. Until the next time, be cool, and we'll check you in the next episode.